Right, so first and foremost, let's kind of just do a broad overview of what we covered today. So we started today without any databases. We installed MongoDB, yay. And then we learned about databases and how they work, relational versus non-relational, conceptually. Then we installed Mongoose. Why do we need Mongoose with MongoDB? Why don't we just use MongoDB by itself? Because we could. It has all these, Mongoose is just calling MongoDB functions in the background.
Mongoose gives us structure for our data.
Yes, Mongoose gives us structure, and it gives us super nice querying functions like find. All of this is through object modeling tool. Yes, we make our model. Yeah, so Mongoose is amazing in that sense, but when we say find, Mongoose is just doing a MongoDB method in the background. To show you what I mean, if you're in any terminal, now that you have MongoDB installed, you can say the word Mongo, and you've entered the Mongo shell, which means you're interacting with the Mongo program on your computer. So once I'm in Mongo shell, I can say commands like show DBS, and that will show every database I've created so far. I can even go into a database and start making get, post, put, delete requests right here. That's what Mongoose is doing under the hood, so it's just putting a nice layer on top of this. I can exit the shell by saying Control-C. We'll never really be in the shell, but it's good to know it's there. What we do in the shell, you can also do in Compass. And this is a nice GUI that uses the shell commands.
How easy is it to delete your database?
You go right here, you click the trash can, you type the name of the database and drop it, and it's gone.
Okay, so you can't do it from the terminal.
Oh, you could, yeah. You could go into the Mongo shell, and then you'd have to...
Yes. No, we should know.
So you can go into a certain DB, and you can, or you can just say drop and drop one. But yeah, we won't be doing that. Mongo shell or MongoDB Compass is a much prettier way to interact with it, but just know that's what's happening with both of those, just using shell commands.
Oh, do you need the shell version open or the shell open?
No.
Oh, sorry.
MongoDB is just, it's a kind of a hard topic to get at first. When we're running a full stack application, how many servers are we running locally? 3. So client, that's React. Express server, that's 2. MongoDB, that's 3. So that's running on what port number? 27017. When you said brew services start MongoDB, it started up the MongoDB server and it's not stopping. It's just going to keep running, just so that if we make any sort of Mongo commands, it's always listening, ready to respond. Now this is a tricky part of the group project because you'll all be working on the same program, but your databases are local. So let's say Mark and Dan were in a group and they're making a database. Their databases are separate databases. Because they're 2 separate computers. So once we deploy it, we then put one database up in the cloud and have that be the final database. But while you are developing, if you need to share databases, one person has to create it, export it, send it to the other person, and they can import it. And we'll talk about how we could do that if it's needed. All right, so we have 3 servers running in total, but we only have to start and stop 2 of them, the back end and the front end. We talked about the order that we create a server in. We start with, you know, all the setup, the installs and the server.js and kind of this boilerplate setup. But once we have the boilerplate, what do we create first, the model or the route? We have been doing the route first because we had a fake database. But now that we have a real one, we want to define our data with our model and then define how we're going to interact with that data using our routes. So we say, this is what a movie looks like, and then movie router, this is what we can do with that database, or that piece of the database. Model uses Mongoose schema to create a new blueprint. We export it as a model, give it a model name, and we tell it what blueprint to use whenever we're querying or using that model. Okay, server. Then we got into the CRUD functions of Mongoose. So we have find by ID, all these. So find by ID is totally fine to use. There's another one that you should know of called find one. The difference between find one and find by ID is that it's not expecting an ID in this first parameter. It's going to expect a query object to tell it what to look for. So this is equivalent to find by ID. We're saying find one by ID by placing the filtering criteria here and say find one whose ID matches this ID.
But you could type in like a specific title or.
Yeah, or we could say find one whose title is rec.params. Title or rec.query.title, and we can do a find one that's not just by ID. We can do it by title.
Oh, wow, see, like when you're creating databases, you have to think about everything they want to search for.
Yeah, so find by ID, perfectly fine to use, especially what we're using this for. We always are finding and updating by ID, but it's very strict in the sense this will only find by ID. If we want to find by anything else, including IDs, we have to use find one and provide a filtering object. Right, so there's find one by ID. If we did find by ID and remove, there's also a find one and remove, which takes the same filtering criteria. We give it the ID.
Can we put more than just the ID as a filter?
Yeah, we can say find it if it has this ID and if it has this title, you found the right object. JAWS 9.
What if you just want to do it just by title or just by ID?
Then I'd just say by ID, or I'd say title rec.params.title or rec.query.title, however the user is going to send it to me. So find one and remove is the same by find by ID and remove, except we just send an object in to tell it what to look for versus just the ID. Same with find by ID and update. We can say find one and update, as long as we provide a filtering object for the first criteria. Our database is, our API is working the exact same that it was before, just to show you there is variation in these methods. So there are a lot of Mongoose methods. Let's go to the Mongoose docs and see them. So here is the Mongoose documentation for setting up a schema. Here's all the data types you can use. There's object ID that we'll use eventually, but these are the data types for MongoDB. Bye, Sam.
Bye, Sam. Have a good weekend. Love you.
Remember who you are. See, so key value pairs is showing us, name could be a string, binary could be a buffer, living could be a Boolean, updated could be an object. It's a type, date, and defaults to the current date. These are the data types we have for Mongoose models. And there's a lot of options for them. Well, what about the querying methods? So we're in the Mongoose docs. We could go to queries. Let's look at that. Queries. Yeah, there we are. Delete many, delete one, find by ID, find by ID one, find by ID and delete, find one and remove, find one and delete.
What's the difference between find one and replace and update?
Replace and delete are deprecated. We should be using find one and remove, or find by ID and remove. If you use one of these, replace or delete, it'll work probably, but you'll get a deprecation error in your console that says don't use find by ID and delete anymore, use find by ID and remove. It works better. All right, so there's not too many here, right? This is pretty straightforward. Replace one, update many, update one. And then it gives you the syntax for person.find one whose last name is Ghost. Go find them, come back, handle the error first, and then handle the data. They're using escaping sequences that are built into Node, but we're just sending it as JSON. Right, so really good docs in here for the basic queries. And they even say CRUD operations. You can go in here and see CRUD operations on Wikipedia. But look, we've only looked at models and queries. Look how much more is in Mongoose. There's a lot. There are some really powerful query methods in Mongoose that we'll end up going over. But if you want to get in the back end, you should know all the frameworks inside and out eventually, so you'll be reading that documentation. I know how much we love reading documentation.
Yes. Yeah.
But if it's something you're interested in, the documentation is enlightening. You should be able to read a sentence and then go play with it, right? Don't just keep reading and reading. It's not a book. It's something to be practiced and read, practice while you're reading. All right, so any questions on the find? Was this straightforward enough?
Yeah.
Movie find, come back with an error or movies. We can even put filtering criteria on the find. We can say, actually, find all whose genre is horror. And now my get request to movies will only return the part of the collection that has a genre equal to horror.
And that would be like a filter. Right?
Yeah, so we'd probably be using queries for that. So, you know, rec.query.horror or rec.query.genre, and that way the user can choose the genre and our route can handle it. All right, so get movie.find. We get one, we still use the parameter. We just say find one whose ID is equal to that parameter ID. Come back with an error or the movie. If it comes back with an error, we send, you can send a string or you can just send the whole error object. Else if it didn't find a movie, we didn't find it, great. Send an error saying movie wasn't found. We're not using next just yet. So we would, instead of next, we'd say return res.send new error. And then if none of these were the case, great, then send the movie they asked for. And here's an example of setting up our own status codes off of an own error we want to make up. Post request, we actually use the blueprint to make an instantiation. And this right here is what gives your object the ID. Then it tries to save it. And this is where it will fail if this object doesn't have all the properties it needs. And it'll send back the new movie. Res.status 500, return res.send error. Delete, find one and remove by this ID. A funny thing with find one and remove, what does it actually send you back after it deletes it?
That it's sending you back the movie object that you deleted.
Yeah, it sends you the object that just got removed, kind of like your last chance. Like here it is, if in case you want to use it. What I usually do, I don't want to send the object back. I'll say, you know, successfully deleted movie.title. And I'm just using that to customize the message that comes back to the user. But it's up to you. You could send the whole object too. Then put's the most intense because it requires 4 arguments. Filtering criteria, what am I finding? What am I updating it with? Should I send the new one back? Always yes. And then here's the callback function to handle the response. This is our .NET. Yeah.
And what you do is false.
I have never ran into a purpose for someone to update something in a database and want the old version back. Never seen it, but I'm sure there's a reason because they allow it. Yeah, awful joke. It's a poor joke. Return res.send error. We want to make sure that we don't set the status and then return. We don't send the error with the, because it would set the status to 500 and then it would send the movie. And that's kind of, it's like, it didn't happen, but here's your movie. So we'd set the status to 200 and send the movie. Actually, 200 is for get requests. Does anyone know the status code for post and put requests? A successful insert or a successful update has a different status code than a get request. 201. So post request, we would also say response.status is 201 and .send the new movie. On successful finds, we say res.status 200 .send the movie. Which we had there.
What about delete?
Delete. There's a couple options for delete. There's one that we don't want to use because it means no response. So let's see. Delete request status code. 202 is what we want to use for delete. 204, no content. Even if you res.send something, nothing's being sent because your status code says no content. So don't use 204 unless you don't expect on getting a response. 202 can be used that the instruction was accepted by the server and the resource was marked for deletion. 200 looks like it's also okay.
So do you want to, for all of the successful ones, put a
Yeah, yeah. Or else the server's going to get, or the client's going to get a response and not know the status code. And that's actually kind of how Axios handles, how does it know to send the response to a .catch versus a .then? A lot of it is checking the response status code. 200 means great, .then, resolve the promise. 500 means something went wrong, reject it, and send it to the .catch. So if we're not sending the status codes, our front end could get confused and put a response in the .catch rather than the .then because it thought it was an error. So a little addition to these. And we always want to return the error if one occurred. So this CRUD functionality needs to be practiced. So we will give you one exercise to play with over the weekend on top of everything else. But this one is my favorite because this is what taught me back in a weekend.
But you're crazy. Why'd you do it all over the weekend? Because he's crazy.
Because I obsess over things. And I obsess. So CRUD store. This purpose is just to make a backend for an e-commerce store. So you don't do anything client-wise, but you build a new server connected to MongoDB, you create a model, you create an inventory model that can have any properties you want, you know, like type or cost and all that. And then you create a routes folder that lets you do the CRUD operations with that inventory, and you test it all in Postman. I promise you, if you do this even 2 times, backend's gonna be easier because it's a pattern. You just need to write these functions a couple times, and it becomes very comfortable.
Evan told me to do this one 10 times.
I told Evan to do this one 10 times.
Yeah, he said he understood it once he did it.
Yeah, I don't want to take credit for that, but I did tell him to do that, whether he admits it or
We
not.
said it helped a lot.
It does.
He does everything twice.
How long does it take to go through the first time around on average?
The first time will take just as long as it took you to do this the first time with like Bounty Hunter to do. You're starting fresh. It's all pretty new. You're gonna have to be looking at notes. Second or third time, you start getting into routine. I mean, there's more things to be working on, so 10 times is a little excessive unless you have all weekend. Once is a necessary. 2 to 3 times would be awesome. But we also want you to fill out the Bounty Hunter, which is going to be doing the same thing. But the big part about Bounty Hunter is then you're going to go to the front end and at least get and post working with your own database. So you have to build the form, handle submit, all that. Make sure we remember how to do React forms so that we can get and post to our own database on a front end site.
So for the CRUD store, at least it posts.
So do it all the way through on the back end, but on the front end for Bounty Hunter, try to do the get and post. So the back end works fully. All these requests should be built into Bounty Hunter, but in your React app, build the ability to do this, you know, component did mount get request, and also the ability to post new to-dos to the database. Yes, and Monday we'll be doing that together. We'll go through building out a front end that uses our database, unless we want to right now, but I don't know how our brains are
Can
doing.
you populate an API into your own database?
What's that?
Can you populate an API into your own database?
Like a third-party API's data?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just scrape it all, steal it all, post it to your database.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a couple public databases that people needed like country codes from. And so you just build a for loop that does a get request and then subsequently does a post request to your own database, takes all their data, adds it to yours, and then you erase the for loop and you have a database. Totally legit. If it's an open API, it's not stealing, it's up for grabs. Now, if it requires an API key, I probably wouldn't save it, you know, try to take all their data, but.
So in Bounty Hunter,
Bounty Hunter, do all, you know, get the whole back end working, and then at least in your React app, try to get and post working. So your bounties show up. The idea is, let me
the
grab.
bounty that we put in our back end, that array, does that array stay in the bounty router, that JS?
So we've deleted the array because now the array is being maintained by MongoDB.
Okay.
So this is where our array is now. And we're accessing it through these methods. If we want to see it, we have to go to Mongo Compass and say, here's my movies. Let me refresh. Oh, that's all I have right now. So there's my current movies in the database. says I have 3.
Is there, it just seems like you get so lost in your files.
Oh yeah, this right here, that takes time. You do get faster at it. Just stick to this structure.
Yeah.
Back end is models, node modules, routes, server. Front end is client. And this will be everything we've been working with so far in the course, our React app.
And keep doing like components and everything too.
Yep. So what is the one thing I have to do on my client to make sure it communicates with my backend?
JSON.
Package JSON.
And proxy.
Tell it what port your server is running on. And then how do I actually send a GET request? What's the URL I need to do?
Just the
Everything.
So do I do like axios.get to HTTP? Yeah, I don't need all this. All I need is this. Now, what if it's a third-party API like Rick and Morty? Do I just do / Rick and Morty? Yeah, this one I need to start with HTTP so it knows this is not to be proxy.
But here's my question: is what if your client folder isn't in your server? Like, what if it's not a child directory? So, like, let's say on a separate part of my computer, I have my React app, and then my server is somewhere else, but I still have to.
That's how this is. These folders, even though client is in the same directory as our project, it doesn't actually really matter that these are together until we deploy. The important thing is this server is running on our localhost 7000, and our front end has been told to look at localhost 7000 for proxied requests. They could be in 2 separate directories, they would still connect because it's just going port to port. But when we deploy, this is the folder structure we need, so we're just going to develop this way so we don't have to change everything just to deploy it.
So I was going to ask, because they can then deploy it with your, and then it'll know your GET requests will go to wherever your
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely need them in the same directory for deployment.
And by deploy, you mean GitHub and all that stuff.
Heroku, so people can visit your site and it has a working database and all that. We use a GitLab, MLab is our database service provider through Heroku. Okay, one other thing. So I'm gonna put CRUD store in the Trello list. I'll put a link to it in Slack as well, because that's a great one. We'll try to get you your groups no later than Tuesday, but I'm shooting for Monday. They're typically groups of 2 to 3. I like 3 personally, even though it's hard to split an app into 3 separate units.
Style or backend.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, does somebody want to just style for a week and a half and not practice the other? So you try to be inclusive of everything. Everyone has their own coding style. People are at different levels with the technology. So it's really a test in empathy and willingness to work together. Yeah, and I know not to I'm not trying to demean or anything, like, we're all adults. So, you know, we can get along even in stressful times. It's only in this course or when you're learning the code that code is your own precious thing. As soon as you get out of here, you'll never have your own thing unless you're doing like freelance work. You're a part of a whole. You have to learn how to put your code right inside of everyone else's without changing theirs, unless it's obviously wrong. And then you go talk to them. You don't just change it, because that makes other developers angry.
Yeah.
When you just change their code and don't tell them why. Yeah, I didn't like what you named them. Well, at least talk to me about it. Oh, they will, and they get to work the next day and see that their code's changed. Okay, so I'm going to give you Bounty Hunter Part 3. You already have that. Well, we're going to give you Bounty Hunter Part 4, which is just swapping out the fake database for MongoDB database and using Mongoose. So you're probably already doing that, but
So 3 and 4 can kind of be combined.
3 and 4 is just like actually use a database and build a front end on top of it. And whoever Robert Williams is, he says it's pretty simple, so we should be able to get it. No, I think Robert was downplaying the learning curve on this.
Yeah, I
Wait,
remember.
Robert Williams?
He used to be instructor here a couple of years ago. I think he works in Berlin now. Cool guy. Okay. So these are the last two assignments. If you notice, full stack group projects up next. We have one more lesson to do, air handling express. It's a 10-minute lesson. If we want to do it now, we can. 10 minutes.
Why the fuck not?
10 minutes.
Can we go take a 5-minute break?
Oh, we just got off from a break.
So let's have smaller bladders.
Oh,
Hey,
yeah.
do you know what the groups are
I
gonna be at?
don't. I try to be pretty even with it.
Oh, wait, we don't take our.
No, it's, yeah, tribal mentality can be.
Are you gonna go?
Air handling express. Sam did a lot of it using the next keyword. We're just going to throw that into it, make it.
We're going to stop the recording on this one.